Imagine this. You're a physician who lives in America. You've worked all your life. You're just nearing retirement age, but then you decide to change everything, to sell everything you've got, to change everything you've ever known, and move to a country that you've never been to before in your life. Fill in the gap between you're going to move to New Zealand in a couple of months. What made you do that?
Okay, so like a lot of Americans, I'm very concerned with the erosion of democratic values since 2016. But I just felt trapped because I was like, I'm too old to go anywhere.
In this week's show, you're going to meet Ginger. Ginger is a woman, she is one of a kind, and she decided one day that she no longer wanted to live in America. She wanted a new life in New Zealand. If anything will make you inspired to keep living your life and keep going for adventures, this episode will. So sit back and enjoy Ginger. It's a Drama, coming to you from Taranaki, New Zealand.
Hello.
Daddy, I love him.
Mother thanks you.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Ginger, welcome to the podcast. Please
Liz,
tell me
it's
all
great to
about
be
yourself.
here.
Thank you.
Okay, first, I want to thank you both for giving me the opportunity to share my story. And I want to echo what all your other guests have said about how valuable the community you created is.
Thank you.
And I've been really experiencing that recently with the whole emotional ups and downs. And it helps to know that other people are going through the same thing.
I'm happy about that. Thank you, Ginger.
So I want to just move back a bit because since I'm a little bit older than most of the other people in the group, I was born in Seattle in Washington, but I moved to Alabama back in 1964. My father worked for Boeing, and we moved to Huntsville to work on the Apollo moon landing. Well, he worked on the Apollo moon landing. Obviously, I didn't. But it felt natural to go into engineering, and it was actually in college that I met my husband, Dennis, during end of my freshman year. He was working on his PhD, and we got married when I was a junior, and we moved to Birmingham, Alabama, not England, and he taught electrical engineering there for 30 years. So during my senior year, I decided to go to medical school, and I ended up spending over 20 years doing emergency medicine, mostly in rural Alabama. In 2014, I decided to go back to my med school to do a fellowship in palliative medicine, which is what I do now. But unfortunately, Dennis died, literally like 3 weeks after I finished my fellowship. We had been married for 38 years, but we didn't have any children. When he died, we had 3 dogs, and Rusty was 2, and he's almost 10 now because, like I said, it was 2015. So that's who I've got, my family now, Rusty the Golden Retriever. I do have a sister who's been very supportive. She was career Air Force, and when this came along, she said, you got to do it. You'll always wonder, what if you didn't? Of course, she's going to be upset if I end up staying there, but,
Yeah.
As far as coming to New Zealand, it wasn't exactly on my radar until recently. Back in 2012, I met a recruiter from South Australia, which I think is a pretty rural part of Australia. And I met her at a medical meeting. And, back then they would actually pay for you to fly all the way to Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah. To see if you liked it.
Oh, that's nice.
I said to my husband, we should just go because, even if we don't take the job, we get a free trip to Australia. I couldn't get him to do it. Even though he was already retired. He was 9 years older than me. So after he died, I contacted the people in Australia, and they just weren't hiring palliative care people. Maybe they are now, I don't know. So I've been doing palliative medicine at the VA for the last 7+ years. And for listeners who aren't in the United States, the VA is the system that we have for veterans, military veterans. And it's actually the closest thing that we have to something like a single payer system. Because veterans who use the VA, we don't have to worry about, do you have the right insurance? You heard a lot of that from your the Americans in the group. But inside the VA, if you're a patient in the VA, all I've got to do is send you to the right. So, there's a lot. It has all both the pluses and the minuses of that kind of system.
So can I just ask before you carry on? So I've just got a couple of questions. What is palliative care? What does that mean?
Okay, so it means... official World Health Organization definition, is caring for patients and their families. And the patients are people who have life-limiting conditions. They don't have to necessarily be dying right that minute, but they have life-limiting conditions. The goal is to treat and prevent suffering. So the difference between palliative care and other specialties is everybody else is pretty much focused on keeping you alive at all costs. And like you can find this talk I did on YouTube several years ago. If you Google Ginger Campbell, I did it at the American Humanist Association annual meeting in 2014 about palliative care. And basically what I said was, death is not the enemy. Suffering is the enemy. For me, suffering's the enemy. Suffering is what I want to prevent. Everyone's going to die. I don't want my patients to suffer. Yeah. So it's a difference in focus. Now, it's true that a large part of our practice is helping people near the end of life. And I have a job offer at a hospice in Auckland, which obviously is end of life. So apparently New Zealand passed a law allowing physician-assisted dying,
right?
Which we only have in a few states in the U.S. But palliative medicine doctors are generally by policy opposed to that because they don't want people thinking that that's what we do.
Right. Okay. So,
for example, at Todor, they allow it, but it's done by the primary care doctor. It's not done by the palliative care doctor. As I said on my talk in the one I did back in 2014, I was blindsided by questions about that. I didn't see them coming. I should have. In palliative medicine, we kind of think if someone wants to have their life shortened, we're doing something wrong because they're suffering so much they want it to end, right? So we kind of feel like that's a sign of our failure, since we judge our success not by making people live longer, but by making sure they're not suffering. Yeah. I should say one other thing about suffering. It's not just pain. It may be existential. It may be psychosocial. So our team, palliative medicine is actually a interdisciplinary specialty that includes nurses, psychologists, chaplains. Physicians are actually a small piece of it.
Right.
So that's another thing that's different from other specialties because physicians really have to work in a team. They can't just go, doctor does it all, because that's just not the way it works.
Yeah. I'm really, really interested in your personal story. I just want to clarify. So are you still living in Alabama?
Yes.
Yes. Right. Okay.
I live in Birmingham, at least for one more month.
Right. And we're going to get to that in a minute. And
I'm not coming to New Zealand in one more month. I'm just going to North Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love your accent, by the way. So let me just, because I'm missing a big, well, first of all, can I just say that when you reached out by email to me and you said about joining the group and you asking questions about the group, and at the bottom you just signed your name, you just signed your name, and I thought, okay, Ginger Campbell, and I underneath it said something about podcasting. So I thought, like being a podcaster myself, I'll just Google Ginger Campbell, and bang, up comes all this stuff that you've got this amazing podcast. I don't want to let this go. I think it's very important. You've got this amazing podcast. You're doing fantastic work out there called a podcast called Brain Science is just one of the podcasts that you're doing. And it's just, I just want people to know, because they're probably listening to you and you're talking about, I did this talk on YouTube, and they're thinking, what? Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. Who is this woman? So I just wanted to make it clear that you're a flipping star, Ginger. You're out there doing it all.
Well, there's actually a person in the group who's already heard the show. I think it's one of the mics.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
More than one mic, right?
Yeah. So you spent your life just studying the brain. Is that right? Is it you're just
actually no.
Okay.
It's not my job. Everybody thinks like I'm like a neurosurgeon or something. I'm not. It's a hobby. Basically, I got interested in it around I think it was around 2003. I started reading something called Philosophy of Mind, and I discovered that, I don't know if you have any background in philosophy, but it's interesting. Historically, philosophy talks about the stuff that science can't quite grasp yet.
Right.
So philosophy of mind is this field in philosophy that really started because until fairly recently, nobody thought that science could study consciousness. So everyone that was interested in consciousness would go into philosophy instead of science because it was just too soon. Just like before physics was physics, it was called natural philosophy. So I realized that all this stuff was happening in neuroscience that I didn't know about because I hadn't paid attention to it. Let's think. This was 2003. And I mean, I had some exposure to it in grad school before I went to medical school. Things have changed a lot in that amount of time of 30 years, probably more than 30 years. But at any rate, I didn't know how much was being, so I started reading. And then actually it was an Australian guy that got me into doing brain science because back in the early days of podcasting, discussion forums were still popular as before Twitter and Facebook. And I was on his discussion forum. It was a show called The Philosopher's Zone, and it was about the intersection of philosophy and science fiction. And people were always talking about the brain, and they were always saying this stuff that was wrong. And I would get on there and say, if you would just read X or you would read Y, then you would know that it's really this. And finally he says, why don't you just come on the show and talk about a book? And so, and he wanted it in 10 minutes, which was really hard. But I did it, and I was like, this is it. I mean, I'd already known for about a year I wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't want to know what I wanted to make it on. I knew I didn't want it to be medicine. That would be too much my job. But I did this, and I got this huge, I'm sure you must have experienced this, the adrenaline rush of doing podcasting. So I did this, and I was like, this is it. I will never run out of material. This was in the summer of 2006. So it was before neuroscience was as hot as it is now. So that's the story of that.
Oh, and you're doing such a fantastic job. And there's so much more we could go into there, but I want to know about your story about New Zealand. So here you are, you're living in America. You asked your husband to go to Australia and get a free ticket over there, and he said no, because so you're like, so then how do you come to, tell me how, fill in the gap between you're going to move to New Zealand in a couple of months. What made you do that? Okay.
So like a lot of Americans, I'm very concerned with the erosion of democratic values since 2016. But I just felt trapped because I was like, I'm too old to go anywhere. But in October, I was actually contacted by a recruiter on LinkedIn. And it's not the first time that I've been contacted by a recruiter. Last year, I almost got a job in my hometown through a different recruiter on LinkedIn. And unfortunately, it fell through, but it made me aware that I was really ready for a change. So when this guy contacted me, I was a recruiter from the UK, actually. And he put me in touch with the folks at Totara Hospice. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm still trying to get the hang of the Maori pronunciation. But anyway, it's in South Auckland near the Botanical Gardens, if you've ever been to the Auckland Botanical Gardens. Yes. Yeah. And so I had some Zoom interviews, and they gave me a job offer way back at the beginning of November. But the ordeal with the Medical Council of New Zealand just won't end. Yesterday, I got an email saying that they had rejected my application and I have to have an interview. Oh. That's after they made me wait since December. So
you've had this
probably work, and yeah, it'll probably work out. But that's why it's helpful to hear everybody else's story and realize. I mean, the recruiter keeps saying, "Don't take it personally."
So, Ginger, just for other people listening that are in the healthcare industry, there is an age, am I right that there is an age cutoff limit when you come to work in New Zealand?
No, it's not specific to healthcare. It's the current visa rules for applying for permanent residency.
Right.
Even if you are a shortage profession, I think it's 50. Yes. It might be 55 because I'm so far away from both of them that I can't remember which one it is, but because I'm 67. But I think there was a window last year. You know, the person you interviewed from the States who came over to be near her grandkids.
Yes,
that's a nurse.
Yes, Sherry. Yes.
She caught that window.
Yes, right.
I missed that window.
So how are you coming then?
Well, I'm coming on a work visa. That part's should be pretty straightforward. But thanks to the contacts that you have on the website, I wrote to Prudence and she connected me with somebody at New Zealand Shores, Charlotte.
Yes.
And she told me that once I'm there, I can apply for an age waiver. And you cannot tell that from the immigration website. So that is something I would like to pass on to anybody who's worried about that. But the thing I want other doctors to know is two things. One, if you're American, we don't use the ECFMG. I mean, most of the world does. And so one of the things and as long as you went to medical school in the States, you have no reason to ever deal with that. Don't trust me, doctors will know what that is. And when you get ready to try to get a job in New Zealand, the way that your credentials are vetted to make sure that they're real is through a site called Epic that's owned by ECFMG. So the problem I lost a whole month on this, which is why I want to share this, is they have this online notary to prove your identity. So first you do your passport and you look like your passport. That's easy. Then they do these questions that seem like they're coming from your credit report, even though they claim they're not. Well, I don't remember, what car I bought 30 years ago. I mean, I could not pass the damn thing. Excuse my language. I couldn't pass it. And I knew I would never pass it from what they were asking. And it took them a month to decide to allow me to use a second ID. So what I'm telling everybody that's at all interested, because it only costs like $130 to sign up for this. Just if you think you want to do it, do that part ahead of time. Because then you won't have something causing a delay, because then I ended up in the situation where my application went into the Medical Council of New Zealand at the beginning of December. And as a New Zealand person, you understand what that means. It sat there.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I could have not had that delay of really a month, I could have got it in November and maybe I would be further along. So I want other people to avoid that. Just if you aren't already on ECFMG, just go ahead and sign up for it. And then when you decide what country you want to go to, the way it works is, according to what country you want to go to, they tell you what things you need to upload and get verified. I mean, New Zealand only wanted my medical school diploma and my specialty certificate. That's all they wanted. But just getting through the stage of being able to put it up there was the hard part.
So have you ever been to New Zealand before? No. So what?
I've never been to Australia either. Still,
right. So you've never been here before. I know about Jacinda, and I know about how progressive your country is, and as a person that has the concerns I have, and I don't really, to be honest, care about the beach, but I do like nature, so I wouldn't mind living inland. I want to live near the botanical gardens, actually. So did you have a short list, Ginger, or was it always going to be New Zealand? Was it like New Zealand, Canada, Australia, UK, or was it always just New Zealand?
It's more like Australia and New Zealand because I hate cold weather. Canada is nice, but it's too cold. The UK is too cold.
Too English.
Rainy. Well, I'm actually an Anglophile, so I don't have a problem with that. I've been to Scotland and London. I haven't gotten to be to the rest of England. Scotland is definitely too cold. So, and I don't speak any other languages, so I was kind of limited. I don't have much language aptitude. People say, oh, you can just go there and you'll be immersed. And yeah, I have a very strong appreciation for why immigrants coming to the United States struggle with English. So
okay, so you've never been to New Zealand, and it was the politics and just the ease of the country that drew you to New Zealand, or
mainly the politics, and then of course the more I've learned about it, the more I've wanted to come. I would say, though, that for me, the most important thing is the opportunity to be a part of a community. I mean, I think that's the most missing piece of my life. Of course, I also hope eventually to meet another special person, but I want to be a part of a community. And the fact that New Zealand is about the size of the state that I live in, to me, that's a attractive smallness.
Is that right? Is New Zealand the same size as Alabama? Really?
Population wise, physically it's bigger, but we have about the same population in Alabama as you have in the entire country of New Zealand.
That's incredible, isn't it? That's...
We don't have as many sheep. We don't have as many sheep.
Oh, well, I'm not coming then. All right. So carry on with your story about, so you've chosen New Zealand, you want to come over, you're having all these problems. What's stopping you? What's the big hold up at the moment? Why can't you get over?
Well, as a physician trying to get a work visa, what I have to do, or any kind of visa if I'm going to work, is my credentials have to be vetted through the Medical Council of New Zealand before I can apply for my visa. So right now I'm still stuck in that process. Okay. So of course, that's the other thing I would say, because I mean, I'm a board certified palliative medicine doctor with almost 8 years of experience. And the letter they sent me said, you haven't provided a sufficient evidence that you are a qualified palliative medicine specialist. Right. So
just listen to my podcast.
Well, no, I'm trying to be really tactful just in case they do. But but what I've heard, of course, the recruiter didn't tell me this ahead of time, but apparently this is not an unusual situation, and and I appreciate, I mean, everybody else has gone through a lot of stuff too. So it's not like it's only physicians, but I think we're a little spoiled with thinking that, I'm a doctor and everybody should be just good with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially for me, because I'm getting close to the 40th class reunion for my medical school class. So I'm like, they picked at my resume for a month before they sent it to the Royal Australasian College of Physicians, which was the one that said I didn't have enough information. And it's like, you have a 3-month gap here. And what were you doing in this 3 months in 1993? And I'm like, it was just a typo actually on my resume, but I don't really get why they care what I was doing for 3 months in 1993. So
I'm sure it will all be sorted though. We keep talking about this and it's like, I'm sure that it'll all come sorted and it'll all come right. But in the meantime.
Yeah, but yesterday was a bad day because I was literally driving to the closing of selling my house when I get a text from my recruiter saying, look at your email. And he didn't say, look at your email, because it's good news. So of course I immediately knew it wasn't going to be good news. And that's when I had that lever. So I'm walking into the place to sign the thing to sell my house, knowing that I'm going to have now another indefinite delay. Because that's the most frustrating, is I don't have any idea. I know that once I get to where I can submit my visa application, that it will probably be about hopefully a month unless something goes wrong. But in the meantime, I mean, like on the 1st of February, the medical council sends me this email that says it could be 10 weeks. And now it's been almost 10 weeks and they send me, not good enough. Now you have to have now they did say in the original letter, you might have to have an interview, and I won't even talk about how much they're charging for that. But I was hoping not to have to do that. So anyway, that's just, and tomorrow's the last day of my job at my current job.
And then what are you going to do?
I'm getting ready to go. Well, this weekend I'm going on a cruise that I paid for 2 years ago.
Right.
But when I get back, I'm going to pack, and some of them, I'm giving away a lot of stuff. I'm trying to downsize. I have 15 bookcases and I'm trying to downsize to 5.
So that house that you're
see my
in,
bookcases back here, you see, they're almost empty now. That's not you. I don't know if you can see the boxes.
I can. Yeah. So that beautiful house, I can tell it's a beautiful house because of the color of the paint. I absolutely love your choice of paint color. How long have you lived in that house?
6 years. I bought this house a couple years after my husband died. I had to move because there was just too many memories,
Too many memories.
They weren't bad memories. It was just like I couldn't, like anything I did, it was, I remembered this, we bought this washing machine. So if I had to buy a new washing machine, it's just a thing.
Yeah.
But this is it's a great house. I didn't have any trouble selling it. And I got a really good price. But I decided when I realized how long this was going to take that I was really burned out on the job I'm in now. And I decided that if this blows up and it never works out, I'm just going to retire, because I'm at the point in my career where I can do that. I mean, I'd have to tighten my belt a little by retiring 3 years-ish early. But I can't afford to do that. So most people can't do that. So I would also say to doctors, don't give up your day job. Wait until you've really got, well, at least wait till it gets through the medical council, because it's going to take longer than you think.
Yeah.
I don't know how that GI doctor did as good as he did, but maybe it's because their fellowship is longer. I don't know. They said my fellowship was not long enough.
Ginger,
how's the length it is in the US?
Yeah. How do you, because I was talking from someone who's come over to New Zealand with her family, and, my mum followed me over here. My sister lives here. When I moved over to New Zealand, I felt like I had a lot of support. I know you're part of our community, but how does it feel to be on your own, just you and your dog that you've got, and you're selling your house and you're going to be moving to the other side of the world? As a person point of view, how do you deal with that? Because that can't be easy to go through that alone. And at any age, I was going to say, when you're older, but actually at any age. But how are you feeling about that? How are you feeling about the whole thing?
Well, I don't really feel like I'm going to be alone. Even without the NZAhead community, I also feel like I already and being embraced by the community of the hospice that I'm going to work for. One thing you need to know about palliative medicine people is that we're people, right? And so taking care of each other is part of what we do. So I already feel like I've been embraced by the CEO of Totara, the head of HR, the person who's going to be my boss. Those are the only people I know yet, but I've already feel connected to them. I think it's going to, actually the hardest part, Liz, I think it's going to be is that Rusty is probably not going to come.
Yeah.
And since Rusty is the only being in my life that I see day in, day out, sleeps in my bed, I think that's, and I really appreciate the episode you did about how to bring your pets. I was kind of on the fence because I had just found out that my sister, who I thought was going to keep him, is not going to keep him. I don't want to move him because he's almost 10, which is pretty old for a golden retriever. He's in great health, but I'm also concerned about where is he going to be when I'm starting this new job. Is he going to be stuck someplace at home by himself in a strange place? And he's not a one-person dog. I mean, he's very loyal, but he's a golden retriever. You've known golden retrievers?
Yes, I do. Yes, I had one.
Yeah, he loves everyone. So I think I'm going to leave him with the woman who's going to keep him when I'm on my cruise. She's my dog sitter / person who cleans my house. She loves him dearly, and it'll be the least disruption for him, because as dogs get older, they don't really like change, right? So I'm balancing what I want with what I think is best for him. And then that price tag is pretty high too, but it's really, he's going to go to the vet in a couple of days, and I'm going to talk to them about it. But because he's just due to go to the vet, it's not a special visit. But I'm leaning toward just, the person who I'm going to give him to is just really, really wants him. And he already snuggles with her whenever she keeps him. So, he'll miss me, but I don't think he's going to miss me as much as I'm going to miss him.
No.
But I think that's going to be the hardest part, because dogs are what got me through my husband dying. Dogs are what made me not feel lonely when Dennis died. So I think that's going to be That's going to be the hardest part.
How about you getting another dog?
Of course,
when you come
never things never show up. Things never turn out the way you think they're going to.
No.
Usually the thing you're worried about is not the thing. So it's probably going to be something I haven't even thought of.
And you know what? There's a lovely, there is a dog here in New Zealand just made for you, I think. And when you come, you'll be united, and it will be, I don't know if you find this, but sometimes when things are like really tough to go through, afterwards you think, oh God, if that hadn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened. Do you ever experience that? And you just, I always try to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's interesting what you just said, Ginger, about as dogs get older, they resist change. And that's the thing that stands out to me the most about you is I just think it's incredible. How old? 67, you said you were. Mm-hmm. You look 20 years younger for a start, and you also act a lot younger, and so I can see that you obviously are not a typical older person, but even so, at this stage in life when most people are thinking, settle down and just put the slippers on, sort of thing. What has given you the drive to think, not only am I going to sell my house, not only am I going to get rid of my beloved dog, but I'm going to move my job, my life, and move to the other side of the world? What's given you the drive to do that? And how do you keep going when you keep getting these knocks going, no, it's not good enough, we need this? How are you keeping going?
Well, part of it has to do with what I've learned from doing my show Brain Science over the years, is that the best thing you can do to keep your brain healthy is constantly have new challenges and do new things. So that's part of my inspiration. When I was younger, I was like many people that go into medicine and science. I just, fantasized that I would win the Nobel Prize, even though there's only been like 4 women Nobel Prize winners. But anyway, I'm not going to do that, obviously, but I'm inspired by the philosophy of some of the Nobel Prize winners that I admire, who always wanted to do a new thing every 7 or 8 years. Because the cool thing about winning the Nobel Prize is then you can do whatever you want. So you can change fields. One of the pioneers of neuroscience was one of the people who got the Nobel Prize for discovering DNA back in 1953, Francis Crick. He spent the last 30 years of his life doing neuroscience after being a chemist. So doing new things is good for you. I mean, that's how you stay young. I started podcasting when I was, 51, and taught myself neuroscience. So then when I decided to do a fellowship, I was like, I taught myself neuroscience. Going back and doing a fellowship 30 years out of medical school can't be any harder than that. Right. And so, so I have a track record of pretty good success. So that gives me the confidence to do it. I mean, I know that there'll be hard times, but I also know that my sister is right when she says, if you don't do it, you'll regret it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? Is you don't want to get to that age where you think, oh, what if, I could have done that and I didn't give it a go. And that's what I always think is like, just do it. And at least then you can say you've tried it. But you're inspiring. You really are inspiring. And I absolutely love, love, love that whole thing of keeping your brain active by just doing new things, even though those new things sometimes feel like, oh, really? Do I have to do it? But it's just, you're right. It just keeps you going, doesn't it? It's just... So what?
I actually interviewed somebody a few years ago named Elkanon Goldberg, who is a neuropsychologist and's written some books about executive function and creativity and aging brains. And he actually said that I can never remember if it's the prevalence or the incidence, but Alzheimer's disease is actually going down despite what people think. And he thinks the absolute numbers are going up because there's more older people, but the actual prevalence per population is actually going down. And he thinks it's because people have to learn new things, right? It used to be you got your job out of college and you did the same thing for 40 years and then you retired. You can't do that now. And look at all the older people who are learning, they've learned how to text so that they can communicate with their grandkids. They've learned how to use their iPad. They've learned these things that have been good for them in spite of their, maybe occasionally complaining about them. So the temptation to say, hey, I've learned it all and I'll just coast is strong, because humans, just like dogs, we love our habits. Habits are comfortable.
What's been the hardest thing you've had to learn about this whole process? What if you had to say one, what's been the hardest thing that you've had to come over? What's been most challenging?
Well, so far, trying to be patient. I mean, I think of myself as being patient, but this is really stretching my patience. It's really, I was so pissed off yesterday. My recruiter said, let's just go to bed and sleep on it. And then we'll talk again tomorrow, because I was really mad. And then, once I got past that, I could think a little bit more creatively that I can move, I can deal with this. But I'm sort of spoiled. I mean, when I decided that I wanted to do a fellowship, so the very head person at the medical school that I went to, which is the University of Alabama at Birmingham, I think they changed the name to the Hersink School of Medicine recently. But anyway, there's a guy who's the head of all of palliative care, and I actually was a resident with him way back in 1991. So when I wanted to do the fellowship, I sent him an email and said, am I too old to be a fellow? Because you could not do a fellowship in most areas this late. But palliative medicine actually benefits from having clinical experience when you learn it. So, but I didn't want to do all the trouble of the application, which included like fingerprints and security checks and sort of like getting a visa. I didn't want to do that if they were just going to say, you're too old. So I wrote to him first before I did it. And then I got an interview, and I go in and it's April, and I think that I'm interviewing for the next year. But at the end of my interview, the guy says, somebody's not coming. Would you like to start in 2 months? So I'm kind of spoiled that way. Yeah. So all this waiting is driving me bonkers.
Yeah. It can be frustrating, can't it? So let's just pretend that you've moved to New Zealand now. You've got you're working in the hospice. You're here. You've got your dog. You're living in a lovely. What does your life look like in New Zealand? What do you want out of New Zealand? What do you want your next 10, 20 years to look like? However many years.
I think the thing that I want a community, and I would, if I could find a special person, I mean, I'm lonely. I would like to have a person in my life, probably a woman. I'm not totally opposed to the other possibility, but pretty much would prefer that it be a woman.
Well, you've tried that. You can have something new now. Did that for all those years.
Yeah, actually, this cruise I'm going on next week is Olivia, which is a lesbian cruise company that's been around for 50 years. So okay. Murphy's Law says I'm going to meet somebody on this cruise since I'm getting ready to move to New Zealand. Right.
I was just going to say that. What are you going to do if you meet the love of your life and she's on there and she's like, I don't want to move to New Zealand. All right, then. But say if you did meet someone and she said, I don't want to move to New Zealand, would you still move?
I think so. I'm not that impulsive, despite my lack of patience.
You just convince her to come with you.
Yeah, well, that whole long distance stuff is hard. It's really hard. I know I have enough friends who have been through it. My sister has had several relationships after a divorce where she tried to, do the Match.com thing. And I think it would be just as good to just get a new friend.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Olivia has a good program for people who are traveling alone. So I know that I'm going to have a good time either way.
Yeah. So where are you going?
I'm actually having a Amsterdam down to Switzerland.
Oh, nice.
And I'm actually having a meetup with about 8 podcast fans in Amsterdam the day before the cruise starts.
Oh, that's going to be fantastic.
Because you realize there's an ulterior motive for that, because then I can deduct my airplane ticket.
Oh, okay.
Keep that in mind.
I just think it's really impressive what you do. I speak to lots of elders who will say, you know, oh no, I can't be bothered. That's the impression that I get. Is like, oh, I'm over it. I can't be bothered. It's not worth it. And I'm just really inspired by your drive. You know, the whole New Zealand, the whole move to New Zealand thing, and now this whole new relationship, which I didn't know about that actually. So you've just told me about that, but the whole thing that, you know, you're making a change. You're making the effort to get what you want in your life. You know, you're lonely, you want a partner, you're going to go out and make sure that you go to the right places where the possibility of you finding a partner is. I just think it's really inspiring to other people just to see you doing this. It's exciting as well, because I just know that you're
well, that's why I wanted the reason I wanted to be on your show is because when I was doing my podcast Graying Rainbows, which is for people coming out later in life, and you can find it with either spelling of the word graying, but I used the A, graying with an A. I had a lot of listeners share their stories, and what I discovered was that people found sharing. I already knew that sharing your story was powerful, but almost every person said, if one other person benefits from my sharing my story, then it will be worth it.
Yeah.
But then they also got something out of it. So that's kind of why I wanted to do it. I wanted to hopefully help at least one other person in some way.
Oh,
more than that. Sort of, maybe have a better chance of meeting other people in the group because they would know what I look like.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, because it is I am looking forward to meeting Cheryl, because as far as I've been able to figure out, she's the only other person that went alone. I'm sure there's other people, but
we have had other people. Yeah.
But that is posted recently, and I don't have the premium Slack, so I can't see a lot of the older posts.
Oh, none of us have got premium Slack. Yeah, it's after 90 days, all the messages go. But the other people that have moved over on their own, we've got Adriana. She's in Dunedin. I think they're mostly in the South Island. I think Auckland. I think Sherelle is probably the first person that's moved to Auckland on her own. So, and we interviewed her the other day. She's just gorgeous. She's so lovely. But yeah.
Yeah, I kept telling her, you need to get on there with Liz. You'll enjoy it. Yeah, because I know from like what I just told you, I knew that if she did it, she would be glad she did it.
Yeah.
Because when I was encouraging her, I got the sense maybe she was a little reluctant, so I wanted to encourage her.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, because it was a lovely chat. We had a really nice time. So before I let you go, Ginger, oh God, it's just been such an interesting story. It's been like all this different paths. Well, what is there any other tips that you'd like to give people who are on the similar sort of path as you, that you would just, I mean, your story in itself is inspiring, but is there anything that I've missed that you would like to add?
Don't be afraid to reinvent yourself.
That's so true. Because like I said, just speaking to people, that when you speak to especially older people, just it's that whole, it's scary. It's scary to reinvent yourself and, just think, I'm going to do something completely different. But where do you get
I had a great,
I was going to say, where do you get the courage from that? But yeah, go on, tell me.
So during the 90s, which I call my new age period, I did some vision quests. Do you know what a vision quest is?
No.
So it's based on the Native American practice of going out into the wilderness for 3 or 4 days and fasting. And back in the days of Native Americans' independence, they would do that to figure out, their path and stuff. And so there was a movement in the 90s of people doing that. And the person I did it with was a woman named Sidonia Cahill, who unfortunately died in an accident in the year 2000. She was 64 when she died, but I worked with her for several years, and she had, when she was in her 30s, had 3 kids. This was in the like 69. She was not, this was like back in the 60s. She decided she wanted to be a hippie, and she had 3 kids, and she moved to Haight-Ashbury, which in San Francisco was, the height of where hippies were in 1967. So that she did that. Then in 1978, when her youngest kid was 16, she went to Asia. She took her daughter with her. She sold everything she owned and went to Asia because she wanted to work with this guru or something or other. She was over there for 2 years and amazingly came back like in 1980. Can you imagine? You left and it was the 70s and now it's Reagan. I mean, talk about culture shock. But at any rate, so then she went to grad school and became a psychologist, but she realized that she didn't really want to be a psychologist. She happened to go on a vision quest, and she was like, I could do that. I could do that better than they're doing it. And so she's in her 40s when she discovers that this is her thing that she's really good at, which she was really good at. And so she is my spiritual mentor because she said 2 things that I've never forgotten. One is, you have to show up. You have to show up. That's the number one rule. You have to show up. And secondly, whatever you say your story is, that's what you're going to live. So you need to make it big. If you give yourself a little story, your story is going to be little. You need a big story, and you need to try to live into this big story. So my husband met her one time in 1995, and he said, and she was probably 60, let's see, she might have been about 60 then, because that was before she died. Anyway, he said, that's the first person I've ever met who's constantly reinventing herself. So that's why I said, don't be afraid to reinvent yourself, because that's my inspiration. Even though, she's been dead for over 20 years, I haven't forgotten what I learned from her.
It's funny how some things just stick, isn't it? And you just never forget it. Brian was telling me the other day that he heard this thing on a podcast that said, is your future brighter than your past? And it really stuck with him. And he just said, it was, you hear something sometimes and you're like, oh my God. And he kept saying it over and over again, is your future brighter than your past? And I thought it reminded me of you, actually, when that's what made me think of it, is just that whole going forward, just blazing this trail, moving forward, and just even though you've obviously massive change is happening in your life. I mean, it's just, what was your husband like?
Yeah, but I think I might be something of a change addict. Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those rare people who actually thrives on change, does it on purpose.
Yeah.
So, I don't really take a lot of credit for it, because really I love change. I mean, obviously not all change is good. Losing your husband of 38 years is not good. But yeah, I like change. I'm a weirdo.
Right. Well, I want you to remember those words then. Okay. So next time your agency phone up and you're having a go at her down the phone and thinking, oh no, just when you're getting all annoyed, just think, I love change. I love change. This is good for me. It's just everything good is going to happen.
I love change. I don't love hassles.
No,
it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
I know, but I suppose just keep the end thing in mind is what I'm trying to say. Is like sometimes, not sometimes, it's always so frustrating going through stuff like this. And you're like, and it's hard not having someone, I would imagine not having someone to vent on and just go, oh, can you believe it? This has happened. But just keep that in mind.
Well, I mean, I usually vent to my sister, although I haven't particularly vented to her about the latest developments, because I'm kind of dreading telling her that, hey, I may be at your house for many months.
Oh, I'm sure she won't mind having you.
Because that's my plan. See, I'm going, actually, when I get back, I'm packing everything up. and going to live with my sister, who lives about 2.5 hours north of me, near our hometown. I'm going there until I get my visa. So that should keep my expenses lower, since I've just, quit my job. It's kind of a thing.
And one last thing before I let you go. Are you bringing anything, or have you just sold everything on, or are you starting afresh when you get here?
No, I mean, I'm not bringing any furniture. My sister's taking some of my furniture. Some of it's going into storage. I'm selling some of my stuff to the nurses I work with, giving some of it away to charity. I'm not that big of a selling person, so I'm not selling as many things as I could. I'm giving most of the things away. Like I said, I'm trying to downsize to 5 bookcases. So if I ever, got permanent residency, maybe I would ship the stuff that I'm putting in storage. I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do like, I'm going to do like the guys did, that carried the stuff in their luggage and nailed it to themselves, because everybody's containers are getting stranded in the ocean. So I'm not interested in that.
No. Well, Ginger, I wish you thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Thanks so much. It's been absolutely lovely listening to you.
Thanks for having me, Liz. And I can't wait till we get to talk face to face.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. When's that podcast thing that you were talking about? When is that? Is it in May?
Yeah. And you need to go to that, even though I think I'm not likely to make it, but it's on the 13th of May.
Right. Okay. In Auckland.
It's just a one-day event.
Yeah. Okay. I'll look into that. All right, Ginger. Well,
maybe you can use my registration, since I've signed up for it, and I'm relatively sure that I'm not going to be there in time to go to it.
Well, you don't know.
I'm now hoping for my World Cup tickets. Okay. I have 2 tickets to the first World Cup game between the USA women's team and Vietnam. It's not like a really big game, but it's the opening game. I'm a big, we call it soccer here, fan, but women's soccer. I don't care about men's soccer.
So you're just hoping to get here for that game and go and use those tickets.
It's in July. I mean, surely I can get there by July.
You'll be here by then. Right. Well, I look forward to catching up with you when you're here, and I can't wait to hear all about your story. So thank you so much for joining me, Ginger.
Thanks again, Liz.
Okay. Speak soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Imagine this. You've lived in the United States all your life. You've spent 30 years with your husband building a wonderful life for yourself. You've got a gorgeous house, you've got a really good job, and you've got all your children around you. But then 2 of your kids decide to leave, and move to New Zealand. So what do?
Every day, I think too, if you're going to do this, if you're going to move, leave everything you know, then have known for 30 plus years, including a very good salary. Better have it squared away in your mind what your expectations are in New Zealand.
In this week's show, you're going to meet Sherry. Sherry was a director of a hospital in the US, and she's come to New Zealand and started all over again. She's over 55, she's with her husband Dan, she's working as a maternity nurse. Her story is amazing. Let's find out.